In the 17th and 18th centuries, a new society was taking root in North America. At the heart of this world was shipbuilding, the backbone of the colonies. New England became the cradle of this powerful industry thanks to its natural harbours and forests. This abundance of timber was the single greatest advantage the colonies possessed. These shipyards were the factories of their day. This industry was a fundamental part of colonial identity, connecting them to a global network of trade. It was a testament to the colonists' ability to tame a wild land and harness its resources. American shipbuilding began with survival. In 1607, the Popham colony faced a harsh winter. The settlers built a ship. They constructed the Virginia. This pinnace was seaworthy enough to cross the Atlantic, becoming the first English ship ever built in the Americas. The Virginia was a symbol of necessity. Shipbuilding began to spread. Small shipyards emerged in coastal settlements. The primary driver was local need. Fishermen required boats. Coastal communities needed vessels to transport goods. These early ships were practical. They were crafted from abundant timber. By the mid-17th century, colonial shipbuilders gained a reputation. The quality of their materials was superb. They were affordable and exceptionally strong. Word spread across the Atlantic. Merchants realized they could purchase high-quality ships for a fraction of the cost. This marked a pivotal turning point. The growth was astonishing. Colonial America had risen to become a dominant force. Shipbuilding was the heart of the colonial economy, setting off a chain reaction of economic activity. Lumberjacks felled trees and sawmills prepared timber. Blacksmiths forged iron components, and workers spun hemp into ropes. Sailmakers crafted enormous sails. Coopers built barrels. Every ship was a product of community labor, creating prosperity and economic stability. A new ship symbolized a community's skill and vitality. The rise of shipbuilding in the American colonies shaped the character and outlook of the colonists. It fostered a unique maritime culture defined by resilience and self-reliance. Shipwrights, sailors and merchants were connected to a global network, giving coastal communities a cosmopolitan character. Shipbuilding served as an engine for social mobility and a skilled workforce. Building ships gave the colonies a sense of their own power within the British Empire. This fostered pride and a burgeoning identity, separate from Great Britain. Ultimately, the legacy of colonial shipbuilding is etched into the foundation of the United States. After independence, this base allowed the new nation to become a formidable maritime power. The tradition born in colonial shipyards shaped the nation's naval strength and commercial destiny. The American colonies became a shipbuilding titan thanks to their access to seemingly limitless timber. England's forests were severely depleted. The Royal Navy needed high-quality wood to maintain its fleet. English settlers found a paradise of wood in North America. The eastern white pine was ideal for masts. This abundance was the colony's greatest economic advantage. The British Crown recognized the strategic value of these forests and passed laws reserving pines for the Royal Navy. This broad arrow policy was unpopular with colonists and sowed the seeds of future rebellion. In 1607, the Popham colony was established in Maine. Faced with a harsh winter and unreliable supplies, the colonists began building a vessel, the Virginia. This small ship was designed for exploration. The Virginia's completion was a triumph. It carried settlers back to England, proving the colonies could produce reliable vessels. The Virginia was a proof of concept, and the first whisper of the maritime powerhouse America would become. Following the Popham colonists, shipbuilding began to take root. The industry gravitated towards locations with deep, protected harbours. Also needed was access to timber resources and a growing population for labour and demand. Towns like Salem, Boston and Portsmouth became hubs of maritime activity. The fishing industry drove early growth, with shipyards specialising in vessels like the shallop and ketch. By the 1660s, word spread across the Atlantic about the high-quality, low-cost ships being built in the colonies. English merchants began placing orders, and New England shipyards were competing on an international stage. While shipbuilding occurred in several colonies, it was the Massachusetts Bay Colony that truly became the undisputed leader of the industry. No other region combined the essential ingredients for success so perfectly. Its coastline was, honestly, a mariner's dream, dotted with dozens of deep, sheltered coves and natural harbours. The great forests of oak and pine were never far away, often accessible via a network of rivers that terminated right at the coast. Most importantly, Massachusetts had a rapidly growing population with a strong maritime tradition. Many of its early settlers came from the coastal towns of England and brought with them the skills and the mindset of a seafaring people. Boston, the colony's capital and largest city, naturally became its shipbuilding heart. Its extensive waterfront was soon lined with bustling shipyards, where the constant noise of construction became the city's soundtrack. But the industry was not confined to the capital. Towns like Salem, Scituate, Newburyport and Gloucester all developed into major shipbuilding centres in their own right. Each town often developed its own specialties. Gloucester, for example, became famous for producing the finest fishing schooners, while Salem and Boston focused more on building the larger merchant ships needed for the lucrative trade with the West Indies and Europe. This network of specialised towns created an industrial ecosystem that was incredibly productive and efficient. The success of Massachusetts shipbuilding was also driven by a culture of innovation and adaptation. While colonial shipwrights based their methods on English traditions, they were not afraid to experiment. They quickly learned the unique properties of American timbers and adjusted their designs to take full advantage of them. They developed a reputation for producing ships that were famously durable, often described as being overbuilt with heavier frames than their English counterparts. This made them particularly well suited to the demanding conditions of the North Atlantic. A Massachusetts-built ship was seen as a sound investment, a vessel that would last for decades with proper care. This reputation for quality was a key factor in their success. By the turn of the 18th century, the scale of production in Massachusetts was staggering. Its shipyards were launching hundreds of vessels each year, ranging from small coastal sloops to massive three-masted ships destined for transatlantic voyages. The colony became a net exporter of ships, selling them not only to merchants in other colonies, but also to buyers in England and across the British Empire. This industry was the engine of the Massachusetts economy, providing thousands of jobs and stimulating countless related trades. The colony had transformed its natural advantages into a maritime juggernaut, a shipbuilding powerhouse that would dominate the industry for the entire colonial period. While New England, and particularly Massachusetts, dominated the colonial shipbuilding scene, it was by no means the only player. Further south, along the banks of the Delaware River, the city of Philadelphia emerged as another major centre of maritime construction. Founded in 1682, the city grew at a phenomenal rate, quickly becoming the largest city in British North America. Its strategic location on the Delaware provided access to the Atlantic, while the river's tributaries reached deep into the rich agricultural and timberlands of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. This gave Philadelphia's shipbuilders access to a diverse range of high-quality materials, including the prized white oak. Philadelphia's shipyards, concentrated in the waterfront districts of Kensington and Southwark, developed a character distinct from their New England rivals. While New England yards were known for producing vast numbers of sturdy, practical vessels, Philadelphia's shipwrights earned a reputation for superior craftsmanship and elegant design. They catered to a wealthy merchant class that valued not only a ship's durability, but also its speed and appearance. Philadelphia-built ships were often praised for their fine lines, high-quality finish, and innovative features. The city became a centre for naval architecture, attracting some of the most skilled designers and craftsmen in the colonies, like the renowned Joshua Humphreys, who would later design the first frigates for the United States Navy. Further south, in the colonies of Maryland, Virginia, and the Carolinas, shipbuilding developed on a smaller scale and served a different purpose. The economies of these colonies were dominated by large-scale plantation agriculture focused on exporting cash crops like tobacco and rice. Their primary need was not for large ocean-going vessels to be sold abroad, but for smaller, specialized craft to navigate their extensive network of tidal rivers and protected bays. The Chesapeake Bay, with its thousands of miles of shoreline, became the birthplace of unique American boat designs, such as the log canoe and the famous Baltimore Clipper, a type of schooner renowned for its incredible speed. The shipbuilding industry in the South was therefore more localized and decentralized than in the North. Instead of large, concentrated shipyards, construction often took place on the plantations themselves or in small, scattered yards along the rivers. These yards built the sloops, schooners and barges that were essential for moving tobacco and other goods from the plantations down to the coastal ports, where they would be loaded onto larger, often New England or British-built ships for the transatlantic journey. While not a major export industry in itself, this local shipbuilding was a vital component of the southern economy, providing the essential logistical link that made the plantation system possible. A colonial shipyard was a world unto itself, turning raw timber into a seafaring vessel. These were complex industrial hubs. A typical yard was strategically located on a river, allowing hulls to slide directly into the water. The ground was a thick carpet of wood chips, the air filled with the scent of pine tar. Dominating the scene were the stocks upon which the ship's keel would be laid. Surrounding the construction area was a collection of specialized workshops. A shed housed the saw pits, where logs were ripped into planks. Nearby, the blacksmith's forge would glow, forging every nail and bolt. Another crucial structure was the mould loft, where ship plans were drawn out. At the top was the master shipwright, a figure of immense skill. Skills were passed down through generations through hands-on experience. This was a kingdom of craft, where practical engineering and artistic intuition merged. It was a community, and the embodiment of the colony's growing ambition. The journey of a colonial ship began deep in the forests, where shipwrights searched for the perfect white oaks, strong, rot-resistant, and naturally curved for the ship's frame. Massive logs were felled and hauled by oxen to rivers, then floated downstream to shipyards. Once at the yard, the timber was seasoned for months or years, stacked to dry and prevent warping. Only after this patient process was the wood cut into planks and beams, each shaped to fit the ship's design. Sawyers worked tirelessly, transforming raw logs into the precise components needed. Every step, from forest to shipyard, demanded skill and strength, ensuring the vessel's durability at sea. The ship's strength was born from the careful selection and preparation of its timber, a testament to human effort and nature's bounty. Colonial shipwrights relied on simple but effective tools: adzes, broadaxes, chisels and augers, each an extension of the craftsman's skill. Construction began with the keel, then the stem and stern posts, forming the ship's backbone. Frames, built from curved oak, were hoisted into place, creating the hull's skeleton. Planking followed, with each board steamed and bent to fit, then fastened with wooden tree nails that swelled tight with moisture. Caulkers sealed seams with oakum and pitch, making the hull watertight. Every tool and technique was chosen for strength and flexibility, vital for survival at sea. Through these methods, colonial shipwrights crafted vessels both sturdy and seaworthy. Their craftsmanship set the standard for generations to come. Shipbuilding was a coordinated dance of labour, beginning with the ceremonial laying of the keel. Frames rose, planks were bent and fastened, and decks took shape layer by layer. Specialists built cabins, installed windows, and painted the hull in bold colours. Riggers prepared masts and rigging, readying the ship for its first taste of water. Launch day was a town-wide celebration, the ship sliding into the sea, greeted by cheers. Though not yet fully outfitted, the vessel's transformation from timber to ship was complete. Each launch marked the culmination of months of skill, sweat, and community pride. Behind every ship stood a team of specialized craftsmen. Blacksmiths forged nails, bolts, and anchors, each piece vital to the ship's safety. Rope makers spun miles of hemp into rigging, while sailmakers crafted strong aerodynamic sails. Carvers added identity with ornate figureheads. Coopers built barrels for water, food, and cargo. Each trade was essential, turning a wooden hull into a seaworthy vessel. Their combined expertise made long voyages possible and safe, The shipyard was a hive of talent, every hand contributing to the ship's success. These unsung artisans were the backbone of colonial maritime achievement. In colonial America, waterways were the main highways, and small vessels like sloops and shallops were indispensable. Sloops with a single mast and shallow draft carried goods and people between settlements, navigating tricky coasts and rivers. Shallops, even smaller, served for fishing, exploration and ferrying cargo from ship to shore. These boats were the workhorses of daily life, connecting communities and fueling commerce. Building them honed shipwright skills and kept shipyards busy. Though humble, sloops and shallops were the lifeblood of colonial society, making growth and connection possible. Their legacy endures in the maritime spirit of America. As the colonial economy grew, the cod fishery demanded specialized vessels. The Grand Banks off Newfoundland were a source of wealth, requiring fast, seaworthy vessels handled by small crews. Traditional boats proved inadequate, leading to a uniquely American design, the schooner. Defined by its fore and aft rig, the schooner allowed for efficient sailing with smaller crews. Its success led to adaptations for coastal trading, carrying goods like cod, molasses, sugar, and rum. The schooner became a symbol of New England's maritime ingenuity. Colonial shipbuilders expanded their ambitions to the Atlantic, requiring larger ships. The brig and the bark became mainstays, the long-haul trucks of the 18th century. Common in ports like Boston and Charleston, brigs were two-masted and square-rigged, ideal for trade winds. Barks, slightly larger with three masts, featured a fore and aft rigged mizzenmast for crew efficiency. These vessels were the backbone of the colonial export economy, essential vehicles of the triangular trade. They generated wealth that fueled the growth and prosperity of the American colonies. At the apex of colonial shipbuilding stood the full-rigged ship. This titan of the transatlantic routes had 3 or more masts, all square-rigged. Its immense sail area gave the ship tremendous power and speed, making it the preferred choice for long-distance voyages. Building one required a large shipyard and skilled craftsmen. Hulls were built of the finest oak timbers to withstand the stresses of the North Atlantic. These ships were primarily used for valuable trade routes, like the crossing between colonial ports and Europe. The ability to produce these vessels was a source of immense pride and a clear indicator of industrial maturity. The full-rigged ship was more than a vessel. It was a statement of capability. While the vast majority of ships built in colonial America were designed for the peaceful pursuits of fishing and trade, the shipyards also possessed the capability to produce vessels for warfare. This became critically important as tensions with Great Britain escalated into the American Revolution. The colonies had no established navy at the outset of the conflict and were facing the overwhelming power of the British Royal Navy. To counter this threat, the Continental Congress and individual states turned to a practice known as privateering. They issued letters of marque to private ship owners, authorizing them to arm their vessels and attack enemy merchant shipping. This led to a surge in demand for a specific type of ship, the privateer. The ideal privateer was built for speed above all else. Its primary mission was to chase down and capture slower British merchantmen while being fast enough to flee from the powerful warships of the Royal Navy. Colonial shipbuilders adapted their existing designs, particularly those of the swift schooners and brigs, to meet this need. They built these vessels with sharp, narrow hulls and a large sail area to maximize speed. While cargo capacity was sacrificed, the hulls were heavily reinforced to carry a battery of cannons, and the crew quarters were expanded to accommodate a large complement of sailors and marines needed for boarding actions. The shipyards of New England and the mid-Atlantic, especially those in Baltimore, became famous for producing these fast and deadly privateers. The Baltimore Clipper, a type of schooner with a dramatically raked mast and a sharp, slicing bow, became legendary for its speed and agility. These privateers became a crucial part of the American war effort. They wreaked havoc on British commerce, capturing hundreds of enemy ships and disrupting supply lines. This not only hurt the British economy, but also provided the fledgling United States with desperately needed supplies, cannons and other war materials captured from the enemy vessels. In addition to building privateers, some colonial yards were also tasked with constructing the first warships for the new Continental Navy. Under the direction of skilled naval architects like Philadelphia's Joshua Humphreys, shipyards in places like Portsmouth and Boston began laying the keels for purpose-built frigates and sloops of war. These were true naval vessels, designed from the keel up for combat, with strong hulls to withstand cannon fire and heavy gun decks. Although the Continental Navy was always small and outmatched by the Royal Navy, the construction of these ships was a vital step. It laid the foundation for an American naval tradition and proved that the nation's shipyards possessed the skill and resources to build a credible fighting fleet. The shipbuilding boom in colonial America created concentric ripples of prosperity that touched nearly every corner of colonial society. The construction of a single vessel demanded a vast supply chain, creating a powerful multiplier effect. The most immediate impact was on the lumber industry. Lumberjacks, sawyers and teamsters found steady employment in the vast forests. This supported a growing middle class of skilled artisans, independent farmers and small business owners. The shipyard was the heart of a dynamic capitalist system, creating immense value and a uniquely American form of economic dynamism. While forests provided the ship's structure, its strength relied on ironworking. Ships were held together by iron components. Demand from shipyards fueled the colonial iron industry. Iron furnaces sprang up across the colonies, especially in Pennsylvania, New Jersey and Maryland. The blacksmith was indispensable, transforming iron into ship parts. They forged nails, bolts and rudder fittings. Ironworks also produced anchors and ship equipment. A large merchant ship required tons of ironwork, providing a market for ironmasters. The iron industry's growth created demand for miners, colliers and teamsters, demonstrating the interconnected colonial economy. A ship was useless without the ability to harness the wind, and this was the domain of the rope maker. The miles of cordage required for a ship's rigging were as vital as its keel. This demand gave rise to the rope walks, long, narrow buildings where raw fibre became sturdy rope. The rope walk was a fixture in every major port city. The primary raw material was hemp. Workers would comb the fibres, then walk backwards, spinning yarn. Multiple yarns were twisted to form strands, then twisted again to form the final rope. This counter-twisting was the secret to a rope's strength. Rope makers produced a variety of cordage for specific purposes. The standing rigging supported the masts, while running rigging controlled the sails. The rope walks were significant employers. The work was skilled, and rope makers were respected artisans. The strength of the ship depended on the integrity of every thread. The explosive growth of the colonial shipbuilding industry did not happen in a vacuum. It was profoundly shaped by a series of laws passed by the British Parliament, known as the Navigation Acts. First enacted in the mid-17th century, these laws were designed to protect English merchants and shipping from foreign competition, particularly the Dutch. The core principle of the Acts was that all trade within the British Empire had to be carried in English-owned ships, with English crews. Critically, for the American colonists, English was defined to include ships built and owned in the colonies. This single provision acted as a powerful government-mandated catalyst for the American shipbuilding industry. In essence, the Navigation Acts created a vast, protected market for colonial shipbuilders. A merchant in Virginia wanting to ship his tobacco to London could not simply hire the cheapest Dutch vessel available. He was legally required to use an English or colonial-built ship. This guaranteed a constant demand for the products of the shipyards in Boston, Philadelphia and Portsmouth. While other aspects of the Navigation Act, such as the requirement that certain enumerated goods could only be shipped to England, were restrictive and often resented by the colonists, the protection offered to their shipbuilding industry was an undeniable economic blessing that they were quick to exploit to its fullest potential. This legal framework gave colonial shipbuilders a significant competitive advantage, They already had access to cheaper and more abundant timber than their English counterparts. Now, with foreign competition legally excluded from the empire's trade routes, they could compete on very favourable terms with the shipyards in England itself. A British merchant looking to purchase a new vessel could buy a high-quality American-built ship for 30 to 50% less than a comparable one built in a London or Bristol yard. This price difference was, frankly, irresistible, and by the 18th century, a huge number of British merchants were placing their orders with American yards, fueling the boom even further. However, this prosperity came with a catch. As the colonial economy grew stronger and more self-sufficient, the restrictions of the Navigation Acts became increasingly chafing. While the shipbuilders prospered, merchants and planters often felt that the laws limited their ability to trade freely and get the best prices for their goods on the world market. This created a complex and often contradictory relationship with the mother country. The very laws that fueled the colony's greatest industrial success also bred a deep-seated resentment against imperial control. The economic power that shipbuilding gave the colonies also gave them the confidence to question and eventually challenge the system that had helped create it. By the mid-18th century, abundant resources and skilled craftsmanship had transformed the American colonies into a shipbuilding superpower. The scale of production far exceeded the colony's own needs. They were functioning as a primary shipyard for the entire British Empire. Roughly one-third of all ships registered under the British flag had been built in the American colonies. A significant portion of the British Empire's wealth was carried in vessels crafted by American hands. The colonies had transitioned to a sophisticated industrial producer. This fostered an enormous sense of pride and capability. It gave them the economic strength and self-assurance to eventually break away from it. The colonies had inadvertently built the very tools they would need to dismantle their place within the empire. Before Lexington and Concord, a quieter conflict was waged in New England's forests, a struggle over trees. The British Crown, needing timber for its navy, claimed the grandest white pines, perfect for masts. Surveyors marked these trees with a broad arrow, signifying they belonged to the king. Colonists saw this as a grievance, limiting their access to resources for homes and ships. This intrusion led to civil disobedience. Colonists ignored the mark, cutting trees at night. These pine tree riots signalled a growing divide between the colonies and Britain, fueling resentment and revolution. As the 18th century progressed, the success of colonial shipbuilding became a source of political tension. The industry had made the colonies wealthy and confident, and port cities became centres of political thought. Here, the ideas of liberty and self-governance took root. Ship owners and artisans were directly affected by British trade policies and felt the sting of imperial restrictions. The waterfront was the nerve centre of colonial resistance. Sailors and shipwrights were among the most vocal opponents of British policies like the Stamp Act. Taverns became meeting places for the Sons of Liberty, where protests and boycotts were organised. The Boston Massacre, a pivotal event, involved a confrontation between British soldiers and colonists. In 1772, tension erupted in Rhode Island when colonists burned the HMS Gaspee. The Boston Tea Party was the ultimate expression of this maritime-led resistance, rejecting Parliament's control. At the start of the Revolutionary War in 1775, the American colonies faced a massive naval disadvantage against Great Britain's powerful fleet. Their shipbuilding industry became a crucial asset. Shipyards converted merchant ships into warships and began constructing new frigates. Privateering also played a key role, with shipyards building fast vessels to disrupt British trade. The colonial shipyard became a potent weapon, contributing significantly to the American war effort. Building a navy during the Revolutionary War was challenging. The British blockade made importing materials difficult, and shipyards were targets. Despite these obstacles, the achievements were remarkable. The Continental Navy won famous single-ship duels, boosting morale. John Paul Jones's victory over HMS Serapis became legendary. Privateering forced the Royal Navy to divert resources, stretching them thin. Shipwrights contributed to the war effort as much as soldiers. Building a navy helped forge a new national identity. The skills developed in colonial shipyards formed the foundation for future American naval power. As we draw our journey to a close, we look back upon the shores of colonial America as a vast and vibrant industrial landscape. The story of shipbuilding is the story of how fledgling settlements harnessed their natural wealth to become a global maritime power. It was an industry born of necessity, nurtured by ingenuity and brought to maturity by ambition. The legacy left by these shipyards is far more than the memory of wooden hulls. It is a legacy of capability and self-assurance. The ability to construct the most complex machines of the age was a powerful statement of competence. This hands-on practical achievement fostered a spirit of self-reliance that permeated colonial culture. This confidence was the essential underpinning for the belief that they could build and sustain a new nation on their own terms. The shipyards were the great vocational schools of their day, training generations of men in skilled trades. This reservoir of technical knowledge and practical experience was a critical asset for the new nation. These values, forged in the noisy, bustling shipyards along the Atlantic coast, became deeply embedded in the American identity. The end of the Revolutionary War did not mark the end of the American shipbuilding industry. It marked a new beginning. The shipyards that had proven so crucial in the fight for independence were now tasked with building the merchant fleet of a new, sovereign nation. With the restrictions of the British Navigation Acts lifted, American merchants were free to trade with the entire world. This unleashed a new era of commercial expansion, and the shipyards of New England and the mid-Atlantic states rose to the challenge. They began producing ships that would carry the American flag to distant ports in China, India, and across the Pacific, establishing the United States as a major player in global commerce. The skills and traditions established during the colonial period continued to evolve, leading to a golden age of American sailing ships in the 19th century. The lessons learned in building fast privateers during the Revolution were not forgotten. They were refined and applied to the design of merchant vessels, leading to the development of the famously swift Baltimore clippers and eventually the magnificent clipper ships of the 1850s. These vessels, with their sharp lines and towering clouds of sail, were the fastest sailing ships the world had ever seen, representing the absolute zenith of wooden ship design. This was a direct continuation of the colonial legacy of innovation and superior craftsmanship. The foundation for American naval power was also firmly established in the colonial era. The experience of building frigates for the Continental Navy provided the expertise needed to create a permanent United States Navy. When faced with threats from Barbary pirates in the Mediterranean, it was a colonial-trained shipwright, Joshua Humphreys, who designed the legendary first 6 frigates of the United States Navy, including the iconic USS Constitution. These powerful ships, built with stout American live oak and innovative design principles, proved to be superior to their European counterparts, securing the nation's maritime sovereignty and announcing its arrival as a credible naval power. This transition from a collection of colonial yards to the builder of a national fleet demonstrates the industry's profound and lasting impact. Shipbuilding was not just an economic engine, it was a strategic asset of the First Order. It provided the physical means for the young United States to project its commercial and military power across the oceans. The ability to build, maintain, and crew its own ships gave the nation the independence it had fought for, ensuring that its destiny would not be dictated by the maritime strength of other powers. The fleet that grew from the post-revolutionary shipyards was the direct descendant of the vessels built in the colonial era. Today, the great age of wooden shipbuilding has long since passed. The bustling colonial waterfronts, once filled with the rhythmic sounds of the adze and the caulking mallet, have fallen silent or been transformed by modern industry. Yet the imprint of this foundational industry remains deeply etched into the American landscape and culture. The names of old port cities, Salem, Newburyport, Bath, Philadelphia, still evoke a rich maritime heritage. In these places, historic homes built by wealthy shipwrights and merchants stand as proud reminders of a prosperous past, and maritime museums work to preserve the skills and stories of this bygone era for future generations. The spirit of innovation that characterized colonial shipbuilding continues to resonate in American industry. The relentless drive to build a better, faster, or more efficient vessel fostered a culture of practical problem-solving and technological advancement. This mindset, which combined traditional craft with a willingness to experiment, became a hallmark of American manufacturing. The same impulse that led a Gloucester shipwright to design a better fishing schooner can be seen in the later industrial triumphs of the nation, from the assembly line to the digital revolution. It is a legacy of looking at an existing technology and asking, how can we make this better for our needs? Furthermore, the story of colonial shipbuilding serves as a powerful reminder of the intricate relationship between natural resources and economic destiny. The industry's rise was predicated on the immense and seemingly endless bounty of the American forests. This narrative also contains a cautionary tale about sustainability, as the depletion of these same forests for shipbuilding and other industries would become a major environmental concern in later centuries. The colonial experience highlights how a nation's prosperity is often built upon its natural wealth and the wisdom with which it manages that inheritance, a lesson that remains profoundly relevant in the 21st century. The echo of the adze, therefore, is more than just a nostalgic sound from a distant past. It represents the birth of American industry, the foundation of its naval power, and the shaping of its national character. The story of colonial shipbuilding is a testament to how a society can be transformed by a single powerful industry. It teaches us about the synergy between resources, skill, trade, and political ambition. In the sturdy frames of those colonial ships, we can see the very framework of a new nation being built, a nation that was confident, innovative, and ready to sail out and make its mark upon the world.